Welcome to the deep dive. Forget surface level takes. Today we're really digging into what makes writing truly useful.
hmm
Our source material, it's from February 2020, argues it's about much more than just, good grammar.
Right. It's about delivering knowledge that actually hits you as true, important, novel,
Mm,
and strongly presented.
exactly, without drowning you in jargon or anything. It's kind
Yep.
of the secret sauce for making ideas stick.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And, while the original piece focuses quite a bit on essays, these ideas, they're broader, aren't they?
definitely. They're for anyone who wants to understand things better or just communicate their own thoughts with, well, impact.
Yeah, whether it's an email
Yeah.
or just trying to make a point at dinner.
Huh, yeah. So our mission today is basically to unpack this useful writing thing, crack the code so you can spot it, appreciate it.
And maybe even use it in your own thinking. Unlock it for yourself.
Okay, let's get into this code then. The foundation seems to be these four key things: correctness, importance, novelty, and strength.
Mm.
Now, correctness. It sounds pretty straightforward. Get your facts right.
It does, but the source kind of pushes us a bit deeper.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about being technically correct in like a vacuum.
Okay. How so?
Well, think about saying something really vague but technically true,
Mm.
like the Grand Canyon is somewhere in Arizona.
Right. True, but not very helpful.
Exactly. Not useful. So the fascinating bit is finding that sweet spot. You want to aim for the most precise claim you can confidently make. The text uses this great image saying Pikes Peak is near the middle of Colorado. That gives you way more useful information than just somewhere in Colorado.
Well, without needing GPS coordinates.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's maximizing the signal without, tipping over into being wrong.
Right, pushing for the sharpest truth possible. Okay. Then we have importance. This isn't just about facts, right? Even accurate ones. It's about relevance.
Totally. It's about connecting with something that genuinely matters to the reader, addressing a question they might have, or shining a light on an issue they care about. And the text adds this really crucial layer. Importance often means revealing something the reader didn't consciously realize,
Oh, interesting.
or maybe articulating some understanding they sort of had but couldn't quite put into words. That's when it really lands.
Yeah, that aha moment. I know exactly what you mean, when something just clicks.
That's it. That's the power of hitting on something genuinely important.
Okay. Next up, novelty. Now, that word, it makes you think you need to, reinvent the wheel every time you write something. Is that the idea?
No, not really. Not
Uh.
at all, actually. I mean, in today's world, with so much information, absolute originality on every single point, that's almost impossible.
Right.
The key here, according to the source, is offering a perspective or an insight that's new to a good chunk of your audience, your intended readers.
So new to them.
Exactly. Bringing a fresh angle, maybe connecting ideas they hadn't seen linked before. Think less inventing from scratch, more like a surprising new way of arranging familiar pieces.
Okay, so not chasing some impossible original thought, but offering a perspective that clicks, that feels fresh for the people reading it.
Hmm.
And finally, strength. This isn't about being loud or, dogmatic, is it?
Definitely not. No. Strength in this context comes from the clarity and the conviction
Mhm.
of your thinking.
Okay.
It's about putting your ideas out there directly, clearly, without a lot of unnecessary hedging or weak words. But
And this is key.
only when those ideas are built on that solid foundation.
Correctness, importance, novelty.
Right. The text even suggests they kind of multiply each other, like factors contributing to the overall usefulness. Each one amps up the others.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've got the blueprint: correctness, importance, novelty, strength. Now, how do we actually build this? Especially ensuring truth and novelty. The source brings up this Morris technique. What's the core idea there?
Well, what's neat about it is how simple it sounds, in a way. It's attributed to Robert Morris, and it basically boils down to having a really high personal standard for what you think is worth sharing.
A high bar.
A very high bar. The fundamental idea is, don't publish it. Maybe don't even say it out loud unless you're genuinely convinced it's a valuable contribution. It's a strong internal filter.
So it's really about that internal gut check first. Is this worth saying?
Exactly. It's not just about being a tough editor on yourself. It's recognizing that your feeling of, is this worth it,
Mm-hmm.
is actually a pretty good filter for quality.
And this leads into that loose, then tight writing strategy.
Precisely. It's a two-phase thing. First, the loose part, just get it all down. A rapid first draft, don't censor yourself too much, explore the ideas,
Wow.
like brainstorming on the page.
Get the clay on the wheel.
Yeah. Then comes a crucial tight phase. rigorous rewriting, meticulous proofreading, sharpening arguments, clarifying language, checking facts again.
And there's that great image about proofreading, feeling for briars, catching your sleeve.
Right.
Tell me more about that.
It's such a good analogy, isn't it? Very visceral. As you reread, some bits might just feel off. Awkward phrasing, maybe it's unclear. Or you get that little nagging doubt, is this actually correct? Those are the briars.
Okay.
The idea is your writing isn't really ready until you can read through it smoothly without any of those snags. Like you think you've smoothed everything out. Then one little thing catches.
Yeah.
That's the briar.
So it's about trusting that internal feeling, that little voice saying, maybe not quite right yet.
Exactly. And it's interesting, how this contrasts with science, where you should publish null results.
Right. Publication bias is a whole other issue there.
Yeah, in science, sharing negative results is vital. Stops others repeating failed experiments. But useful writing, as we're talking about it here, is about sharing insights you believe are genuinely valuable.
So filtering out the weaker stuff before sharing is actually seen as a strength, respecting the reader's time.
Pretty much, yeah.
Now, okay, gauging importance and novelty. This is tricky. The text suggests using yourself as a kind of litmus test. How does that work?
The logic is pretty sound, I think. You, as a curious person, probably share basic interests and worries with lots of other people.
Okay.
So, if a topic genuinely grabs you and you've really wrestled with it, chances are pretty good it'll resonate with at least some other people too.
Makes sense.
Remember, importance has those two sides. How many people care and how much they care.
Okay.
Think about articles you found really valuable. Why did they stick?
Usually because they hit on something I actually cared about or helped me figure something out.
Exactly. Your own engagement is a good proxy.
So if it sparks my curiosity and I dig in, good sign. What about novelty, though? How does that deep dive lead to new insights?
Well, this is where it gets interesting. When you really immerse yourself in something, you start seeing connections, nuances, stuff that someone just skimming the surface would miss.
Right.
Those moments where you have a realization, where something surprises you, someone who's deep in the topic, those are very likely to be novel and interesting for your readers, too. It takes a bit of intellectual humility, the text points out, recognizing when you've learned something new, admitting you didn't know it before.
But that confidence from actually knowing the subject lets you admit that freely.
Exactly. Trusting that if it's new to you, it's probably new to others.
Humility born from confidence. I like that. Okay, let's shift back to strength. We touched on it, but the text gets into this dance between clear thinking and skillful qualification.
Yeah, this is where the real craft comes in, I think.
Oh.
It's definitely not about just making bold blanket statements. It's about showing the right degree of certainty.
Okay.
The analogy of the accelerator and the clutch is really good here.
Yeah.
Your clear thinking, your conviction about the claim that's the accelerator pushing forward.
Right.
But the clutch is your awareness of complexities, limitations, nuances. That tells you when and how to qualify things.
So, like, if you see a correlation,
Accelerator, state the correlation clearly. Clutch, acknowledging maybe it's a small sample or there could be other factors. Using that clutch properly actually strengthens the argument because it shows you're being honest.
So if you're absolutely sure, state it plainly. If there's some uncertainty, use qualifiers. Perhaps, might, it seems.
Precisely. And the text tackles that common idea that qualifiers always weaken writing.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Sometimes they do if they're just wishy-washy.
Mm-hmm.
But often saying, I think X instead of just X is crucial if you want to be accurate about your own level of confidence.
Yeah.
And it goes beyond just a simple scale of certainty, too. Qualifications can signal the scope of a claim, the evidence strength, even your attitude. Mastering that skillful qualification. That's key to strong, useful writing.
The text also touches briefly on simplicity, saying it's more about like being considerate of the reader and helping correctness, rather than a core part of usefulness itself.
That's right. Correctness, importance, novelty, strength, those drive the inherent value. Simplicity makes that value accessible.
Makes sense.
The author even mentions just preferring simple language as an elegance thing.
Yeah.
And, practically. Simple language often makes it easier to spot flaws in the logic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, strip away the fancy words, and weaknesses in the actual thought become much clearer.
Okay, now, let's talk about something a bit uncomfortable. The source suggests that useful writing, precisely because it's novel and strong, can sometimes make people angry.
Huh, yeah. That's a really crucial, if maybe uncomfortable point to acknowledge.
Why is that, do you think?
Well, Novelty, almost by definition, often bumps up against existing beliefs, and people can be really invested in how they currently see the world.
Cherished beliefs.
Exactly. In fact, the text kind of hints that finding widely held but wrong beliefs is fertile ground for really novel, important insights. So useful writing can inherently be disruptive.
So you're potentially rocking the intellectual boat and presenting those new ideas with strength, even if it's just clarity that can amplify the negative reaction.
Absolutely. Stating a novel idea clearly, confidently, it can feel confrontational, even arrogant to someone who disagrees strongly. The text mentions that the whole Morris technique, only sharing what you're confident in, can sometimes be misread. Like you think you're never wrong.
Even though the filtering happened before you published.
Right. And even aiming for simplicity and brevity, which seems good. If you're delivering unwelcome news, it can come across as blunt or dismissive.
Oof. Yeah, I could see that. The text even floats this idea of maybe deliberately weakening statements sometimes, with a kind of wink. What's that about?
Yeah, it's an maybe slightly tricky tactic. The idea is sometimes softening a challenging point with a perhaps, or it could be argued, might make it easier for someone to swallow.
Lower the defenses a bit?
Exactly. Let them consider the idea without feeling directly attacked. The wink suggests you might actually believe it more strongly, but you're choosing a gentler approach strategically.
Does that feel a bit manipulative?
Well, the author seems a bit skeptical about overdoing it, too. It could risk seeming insincere, maybe even patronizing. It's definitely a fine line.
Finding that balance between conviction and not just shutting down the conversation before it starts? Okay. So what happens when, despite all this care, your useful writing just gets misinterpreted? The text has some thoughts on that, too.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's just reality, right? If you put ideas out there, the text really emphasizes, even if you nail correctness and clarity, you're not immune to misrepresentation.
No guarantees.
Nope. In fact, the very strength of useful writing can ironically make it a prime target. Someone takes your carefully qualified point, strips the nuance.
It attacks the distorted version, the classic straw man.
Exactly. And the text notes something interesting. The seemingly logical response, asking, okay, where did I say that? Do me the quote. Often doesn't actually help much.
Really? Why not? Seems like the obvious thing to do.
The observation is that often the person isn't disagreeing with your exact words anyway. They're reacting to the underlying idea, or what they think it implies. Asking for a quote can feel like you're just trying to win on a technicality, and it rarely gets to the heart of their objection.
Okay. So what does the text suggest? It seems to differentiate between honest mistakes and deliberate distortion.
It does. For genuine misunderstandings, stuff a reasonable reader might actually trip over. It can be worth proactively addressing those potential confusion points in your writing.
How?
Maybe even state a slightly slawed version of an idea first, then immediately clarify or correct it. It guides the reader, shows the thinking process.
Okay, but what about the deliberate stuff, the bad faith attacks?
That's different. The advice there is basically don't engage with it directly in the main text. The author uses this phrase like not wanting to spoil your house by constantly fighting off trolls in your living room. Endnotes are mentioned as maybe a place to address really persistent distortions. But it admits anticipating every possible misrepresentation is tough. The main thing is focus your energy on sincere readers.
Engage with genuine questions. Ignore the noise. Got it. Valuable advice. Now, for someone listening who's inspired by this, wants to write more useful essays, or even just think more clearly, where does the text say to start?
The advice is surprisingly down to earth. Start small. Focus on what you already know well.
Your niche.
Exactly. Pick narrow topics where you have real expertise, and don't worry about audience size at first. The act of writing itself is huge for clarifying your own thoughts.
Yeah.
Helping even a few people is worthwhile.
Right.
You can always broaden out later as you get more comfortable.
And here's a really interesting bit. The source actually suggests that writing essays doesn't necessarily mean publishing them.
Yeah, isn't that liberating? The author talks about filling notebooks for 15 years, just exploring ideas for themselves. No intention of publishing most of it.
Wow.
It's about using writing as a tool for your own thinking, your own discovery. There's that great example of Steve Wozniak, just sketching computer designs on paper in high school for fun.
Just figuring things out for himself.
Exactly. It takes the pressure off, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not all about the audience initially. It's about the thinking.
Using writing as your own personal idea lab makes it feel much less intimidating. Okay, finally, the text wraps up with this really exciting vision. about the future of essays and discovery.
Yeah, it's quite profound, actually. The argument is, we've barely scratched the surface of what essays can do for exploring and sharing knowledge.
Because of publishing limits in the past.
Exactly. Historically, getting an essay published was hard. It limited the number, the topics, the voices, but the internet, that changes everything, gives anyone a platform.
Right. Democratization of publishing.
Pretty much. And the author likens this explosion of access to how cryptography suddenly boosted number theory. It just opened up vast new areas for exploration.
So the idea is there's this huge number of essays just waiting to be written.
Yes. An incredible volume of potential insights, connections, arguments that simply haven't been articulated yet, especially in essay form. It represents this massive opportunity for discovering new ideas.
So this vast landscape of unwritten essays means there's just so much potential for new understanding out there waiting to be unearthed through this kind of writing. That's a really inspiring way to look at it.
Absolutely. The really exciting takeaway is that most of the ideas best explored through thoughtful, well-crafted essays. They're still out there, waiting.
So to kind of bring this all together, our deep dive today really showed that this idea of useful writing, built on correctness, importance, novelty, and strength, it's a powerful way to think about both understanding the world and sharing our own takes on it.
And we looked at some practical ways to aim for that, and also some of the, interesting challenges that pop up when you put genuinely novel or strong ideas out there.
Right.
And it's crucial to remember that engaging with new, maybe difficult ideas, whether you're writing or reading, that's vital for actually growing intellectually. These principles offer a really good lens for both creating and judging information.
Definitely. So for you, our listener, maybe think about a topic you've been wrestling with, turning over in your mind. What surprising connection or insight have you had that might actually be useful to someone else?
Yeah.
And how could you frame that? Using these ideas, making it correct, showing why it matters, highlighting what's new about it, and presenting it with, well, appropriate strength. There's this whole universe of undiscovered ideas out there. What are you going to explore?
It's a really good question to sit with.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. Until our next exploration.